Assalamu alaikum and welcome. I am joined today by qualified solicitor Ilora Choudhury, and she worked for the UNRWA and the UN, and she is from the ICJP, that's the International Center of Justice for Palestine. Ilora, welcome and thank you for having this interview with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So firstly, Ilora, tell us about the warning Rishi Sunak received about ICJP's intention to prosecute UK officials for being complicit with war crimes, and what does this mean for him and the UK government?
So what we've seen since the start of the hostilities on 7th of October are UK government officials such as the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary expressing unconditional and unequivocal support for Israel's actions in Gaza, despite clear evidence emerging that Israel has committed war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza, and that it's on the verge of committing even greater mass atrocity crimes. As ICJP, we wrote to the Prime Minister on Friday and we placed him on notice that since there's ongoing commission of war crimes, that if he and his cabinet continue to express unequivocal support for Israel, this could actually make them individually criminally liable. So under the Rome Statute, Article 25, individual criminal liability attaches not only to people who directly perpetrate crimes, but also to those who aid or abet those crimes. And there is case law to suggest that moral support, encouragement, and so on can amount to aiding and abetting war crimes. Now, this could mean that potentially Rishi Sunak and his cabinet members could face criminal prosecution, not only at the ICC, but also in domestic courts or other tribunals through the principle of universal jurisdiction, which basically says that for the most serious crimes, individuals can be prosecuted anywhere in the world in any court. Because these crimes are so serious, they cannot claim immunity from prosecution. And also, I should point out that at the ICC, there is no immunity for prosecution for government officials. So even if you're a head of state, you can be prosecuted at the ICC. And the other thing that's important is that the ICC is currently investigating the situation in the state of Palestine. They opened the investigation in 2021, and any crimes committed on the territory of Palestine, which includes Gaza, can be investigated at the ICC. The investigation is currently open. It seems to be stalled at the moment. Like for the last year, we've been continuously trying to engage with the ICC and find out what's happening with the investigation. But the prosecutor has recently made a statement saying that they are going to be putting more resources into the investigation. So we'll have to see what happens there. But this is fairly important. And I think that public officials in this country, government officials who have been making these sorts of statements should be very cautious, because they could face individual criminal liability for making those statements on the basis of aiding and abetting those crimes.
Mm-hmm. And what should be happening? I mean, how should the UK government and the international community act?
I think it's extremely clear how they should be acting. I mean, it's not just the issue of individual criminal liability, but what we're seeing in Gaza at the moment is the humanitarian catastrophe. I mean, for a week, the Gazan population have been under continual aerial bombardment. They've been under a complete siege with no access to water, food, fuel. The hospitals are all running out of fuel. We've seen more than 2,000 people killed. We've seen, around 800 children already. No, actually, more than 1,000 Palestinian children have now been killed. We've seen the use of white phosphorus in densely populated neighborhoods. And now the latest is that, Israel has issued an order to the half of the population of Gaza. Basically everybody in the north of Gaza, including Gaza City, that's over 1 million people, have been ordered to move to the south. I mean, this is an impossible order. It's going to lead to a humanitarian catastrophe, and Palestinians just unable to leave because many of them are elderly and sick, people in hospitals. They can't just get up and go. So what we're seeing is really a crisis of monumental proportions. I mean, unlike anything we've seen before. And many people are saying this is another Nakba, another ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
Mm-hmm. However, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying the international leaders need to be absolutely clear about what's happening. They need to be absolutely clear about calling this out for what it is. They need to they need to call out the international crimes that are taking place, not just war crimes, but crimes against humanity.
We heard the Israeli ambassador to the UK saying that what's happening in Gaza is not a humanitarian crisis. What's your take on that?
I mean, this is part of the Israeli propaganda. They have so much support in the Western countries. Western leaders, including our own government, and even leaders of the opposition, have continuously been providing Israel with political support and cover for their international crimes. And, we believe this makes them individually complicit. And there is case law to suggest, in the international criminal case law, to suggest that encouraging and supporting war crimes and crimes against humanity can make you individually liable. And therefore, you can be prosecuted both at the International Criminal Court or in domestic courts or in other international tribunals. So, I think not only on the basis of humanity and on the basis of the gross human rights violations that are going on right now in Gaza, but even just to protect their own careers, British politicians, international politicians need to be very, very careful about what they're saying right now. They need to understand the seriousness and the gravity of the situation in Gaza, and they need to unconditionally condemn Israel's actions.
The killing of journalists, Ilora, it's the bloodiest so far, with about a dozen deaths. So what should be done about this?
So far, we've seen 12 Palestinian journalists killed by the Israeli military and more than 20 injured in the space of a week, which is a huge number by any standards. 2 Palestinians are reportedly missing, and 50 Palestinian media organizations have been damaged or destroyed as a result of airstrikes. Clear violation of international humanitarian law, which says that journalists are civilians and they have to be treated as such. And also, journalists working on the front line in situations of armed conflict have to be protected and allowed to do their job so that they can hold governments accountable and speak truth to power. I think what we're seeing is Israel deliberately targeting journalists in an attempt to prevent them from telling the truth about what's happening in Palestine. And unfortunately, this is nothing new. This is a pattern that we've been seeing for many years. Last year, we acted for the family of Shireen Abu Akleh and Shatta Hanaisa and Ali Samoudi in relation to Shireen's killing in Jenin, a refugee camp in May 2022. We filed an ICC submission on her behalf, and unfortunately, we've had very little response from the International Criminal Court. We need to keep the pressure up on governments and on international institutions to take action. They've got to take this seriously. Journalists are there to speak truth to power and to hold governments accountable. And if they're not protected, then we won't have the kind of information and the free press that the Western media is so, that they talk about so much.
Anything else that the International Center of Justice for Palestinians would like to raise that is not common knowledge with what is happening with Israel, Gaza situation right now, Ilora?
I think one of the main things that we need to look out for at the moment is the violence that's happening in the West Bank. There's been a huge spike in settler violence and IDF violence against Palestinian civilians. At the moment, the media attention is really focused on Gaza, and Israeli settlers have been using this chaos to try to attack Palestinians in the West Bank. We have far-right ministers, such as the Minister for National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's been calling for Israeli settlers to be armed. Many of these settlers are entering Palestinian areas and attacking Palestinian civilians. 51 have been killed so far in the space of a week, which is an enormous number. And more than 1,200 Palestinians have been injured, both by IDF and settler violence. So this is something that I think you need to keep an eye on, because it's while the attention is focused on Gaza, we also need to make sure that we don't forget what's happening in the West Bank.
Well, Ilora Choudhury from the International Center of Justice for Palestinians, thank you very much.
Thank you.